stakeholders in preparation of the budget. So I would like to sincerely thank you for arranging this meeting, Honorable Minister. Since this meeting, it is for us to hear from the Chamber. Now it is my singular honor and humble duty to call on the Minister of Finance, Honorable Felix Mnusu, to give his welcome remarks before we request the Chamber to make its presentation. Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Budget Director. Also sitting in your other capacity as representative of Secretary to Treasury, Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. Grant Kabango, Commissioner General of Malawi Revenue Authority, Mr. John Biswick, Chairman, or rather, I think it's President, is it Chairman or President of the Malawi Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Mr. James Chimwaza, CEO of MCCCI, Mr. Chancellor Kafira Panjira, all senior government officials present here, members of the press present here, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this pre-budget consultation meeting, which, as the Budget Director has said, we are holding this virtually in view of the current pandemic. But I would like to express my thanks from the outset for making time for this meeting, that we should interface as we at the Treasury are in the process of preparing the national budget for the forthcoming year. That's the year 2021 to 2022. We thought we should have this interface with you, being one of our major stakeholders in the preparation of the budget framework, to solicit your contributions to this budget framework, to solicit your views and indeed your ideas, so that as we finalize the preparation of the budget, some of your contributions will have obviously been taken on board. We are aware that this process has been going on in the past, and that you have made contributions in the past. Probably some of the contributions or ideas have not found their way in the national budget, but some obviously have. Obviously there are reasons for this. Some of the reasons could be just an issue of timing, that those that were maybe taken into account they had special benefits at the particular moment. But even those that were not taken into account, we have a database in the ministry. So from time to time, and at this point, when we start preparing the budget, we go back to the database and see what contributions have been made in the past. So all your contributions, they are not in vain. They do really form part and valuable contribution to the budget. I would therefore appeal to you and indeed impress upon you that let's be as open as we can to look at issues that should assist us to come up with a budget that we can all not just be part of, but that we can own.
Hello, can I? Thank you. Honorable Minister of Finance, Honorable Felix Mulusu, and all protocols observed. We at MCCCI greatly value this opportunity to engage with government and exchanged notes on the prior to the budget session. It is our hope that our we will extend to you areas that we need to work together in order to get towards revenue with joy, because it will not be constraining, but we can see that we are investing to facilitate all the conditions we enjoy when government creates a conducive environment for business. I will pass on to most of the presentations to the Secretariat, because they have a whole catalogue of points, contributions that we needed to make. I can only comment after the Secretariat has done so. Thank you, Your Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. The presentation is going to be made by the Director of Business Environment and the Policy Advocacy in the Malawi Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, Mrs. Madaliso Kazembe. So, Mrs. Kazembe, please, the presentation. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you so much. I hope you can all see the presentation on the screen. On behalf of Malawi Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, I would like to present the private sector contributions for 2021-2022 budget on behalf of the private sector. Just as a matter of introduction, MCCI is an apex body of the private sector in Malawi, and it exists to advance the interests of businesses in the country to ensure that we add value to the services. We also strongly believe that private sector-led growth would improve opportunities for everyone, as it would also facilitate economic growth of this economy. And therefore, we have always strived to advocate for a conducive macroeconomic as well as business environment that would promote the growth of businesses in Malawi. So the proposals that we are making today are aimed at highlighting the measures that we believe will promote private sector-led growth through adjustment of some fiscal policy measures and reforms. Just to draw you in terms of the macroeconomic context, as we all know, Malawi has been greatly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And according to the Ministry of Finance, in 2020, Malawi grew by about 0.9%, and we are projecting a growth rate of 3.5% in 2021. This is a very modest growth compared to the past years, but understandable due to the pandemic that we are currently facing. And we believe that there are still some risks to the growth of the economy, even though we are projecting a growth rate of 3.5%, but we believe there are still some uncertainties that the economy still face, and that would impact the growth rate that has been projected. And these would include upward inflationary pressures, which are emanating mostly from the non-food inflation due to the increase in fuel price. And also the high public domestic borrowing. As we all know, it crowds out private sector investment. And also there's been shortage of forex on the market, and which businesses have been complaining. And so the foreign exchange market imbalance would also weaken the Kwaja against its major trading partners, and also affect the economy in terms of inflationary pressure, because we are more of an import-dependent economy. And also the widening fiscal deficit it may resort to government printing more money, which would also trigger inflation. So all these, we believe, are risks to the economy that need to be considered and countered if possible. In terms of business challenges, 2021, the first quarter, has been challenging for a lot of businesses in the economy from various sectors, from manufacturing to tourism and even to professional services. And 2020 was also not so different. As Malawi Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, we annually conduct Malawi Business Climate Survey. And in this survey, we try to analyze the challenges that businesses are facing in the economy at a point in time. So for 2020, we did an analysis to see what were the major bottlenecks that businesses were facing. And obviously, the biggest challenge was the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which affected almost all sectors of the business of the private sector. And the second biggest challenge, and the rest of the challenges that I'm going to mention, have always appeared to be the topmost challenges, and therefore we can classify them as chronically challenging problems that the businesses are facing. And these include electricity challenges, both in terms of cost as well as quality of supply. Telecommunication charges have always been also high on the list, as well as quality of supply. Cost of finance continues to be a challenge for businesses, more especially for small and medium enterprises. And transportation costs also seem to be a big challenge for businesses, especially road transportation costs. Taxation issues have also been rated as one of the biggest challenges, which escalate smuggling in the country. This has resulted in closure of businesses, retrenchment of workers during the period under review of 2020, and has also subdued business capacity as well as production in 2020. But as well as in 2021, when we faced the second wave of the pandemic. So just to get you through the highlight of what we are talking about in terms of business challenges that businesses faced in 2020, you see from the graph that almost 65-66% of businesses actually were operating under less than 50% of capacity utilization. And by that we mean that the optimal output that they should have been producing was far much less than what they were actually producing. So they were producing less than 50% of the capacity that their plant or production could actually produce. This is very different from what we saw in 2019, despite the fact that in 2019 there were also challenges, but most businesses were actually operating better. And in terms of capacity utilization, less than 35% of businesses were operating below capacity utilization of 26 to 50%. So this was markedly high in 2020, as you can see from the graph, compared to the other year. But mostly this was due to the pandemic that affected businesses. So in terms of proposed policy reforms, we usually get the issues from our members to see and understand the challenges that they are facing and what needs to be done in order to address those challenges. And therefore, we are proposing the following measures: that there should be deliberate efforts to grow our processing and manufacturing sector so that we do not continue to be an import-dependent economy. If you see from 1994, our manufacturing sector was contributing about 7.4% to GDP. But as we inched into 2019, the manufacturing sector actually, in 1994, the manufacturing sector was contributing around 17% to the GDP. But as we inched into 2019, we were producing only about 9% to the GDP. So we believe there's need to have deliberate efforts in order to grow the manufacturing sector, which continues to dwindle, as we have seen recently that a number of manufacturing companies have been closing down. And this should be a cause for concern so that we ensure that these things should not continue to happen. And so one of the issues that has been highlighted as a challenge in this sector is the domestic tax and non-tax reforms, which create uncertainty in terms of implementation of tax reforms that are introduced during budget session. It is viewed that these reforms are usually focusing on raising revenue and not facilitating and supporting business growth, and therefore they are deemed to suppress the growth that is needed in the industry. And therefore we recommend that government should review the whole tax system to ensure that, other than correcting the revenue, that indeed is important, but there should be a balance in terms of supporting private sector development as well. The other issue, especially to do with the challenges that I highlighted earlier in terms of how companies have fared in 2020, which goes through into the first quarter of 2021, most of the businesses, as I mentioned, are operating way below capacity. And as such, the cost structure of power supply, such as the maximum demand charges, are too high for the industry to take at the moment, especially in the tourism sector, which is operating way below their usual capacity. And also another area that we may need to consider is the sectors that we want to grow as an economy. If we have sectors that we believe would grow this economy, then there should be incentives that would ensure that these sectors actually thrive And therefore, the irrigation farming, because we obviously cannot ignore the agriculture sector, and the manufacturing sector, which I highlighted, that is actually contributing less and less as time goes by, need to have incentives to ensure that they grow. And therefore, review of costs such as the maximum demand charges on these sectors would actually improve as well as facilitate growth in these sectors. The second issue that businesses have been facing is in the area of payment of arrears. This is not a new thing. We have been talking about it for a while. The delays in refunding withholding tax and VAT, and also failure by government to settle such arrears, to the private sector, have posed a liquidity constraint to a lot of businesses, especially during COVID-19 when businesses were not faring well. And so we implore government through MRI to expedite refunds, especially of the withholding and VAT refunds, and also for government to expedite refunds of any arrears that may have accrued to the private sector. Currently, we've been told that there is a 1.5% of all revenue which is collected by government, and it is designated into a special account to clear such tax refund arrears. But we believe this percentage is too low, and would propose that this percentage of revenue should be increased to at least 3% or 3.5% from the current 1.5%, so that most of these arrears are cleared. In 2020, around October, the private sector arrears of withholding tax and VAT were about 10 billion, but as of February, they've risen to 12 billion, meaning that there's still a challenge that needs to be addressed. So we hope that government will consider increasing this funding to MRI so that most of these areas are settled, and it brings at least some sort of normalcy to the private sector. In terms of budget proposals, we also further propose that there should be a review of excise duty calculation. And we believe that currently traders who import finished products, they pay excise duty on cost, but local manufacturers are charged excise duty based on selling price. We are proposing that MRA must revert to the old way of calculating excise duty, which is based on production cost. This we also believe will incentivize the manufacturing sector, which, as I mentioned, is failing at the moment. In terms of building this nation from an import-dependent nation to an export-dependent nation, it cannot be done alone, but we need to have measures to ensure that we incentivize exports more into people to export more, or companies to export more. The survey that we conducted in 2020 actually glaringly showed that as Malawi, we are not progressing in this area. According to the survey we conducted, almost 75% of locally produced goods are actually traded within the country, and only 4% is actually traded on the international market. The rest, which is about 26% or so, is traded both within and outside the country. I think this shows how far we are in order to become an export-dependent nation, and that we need to have drastic measures to ensure that we progress in this area. And therefore, we propose that there should be export allowances that would make it attractive for exporters to export more by reviewing the current provision, which is based on taxable profits according to the Taxation Act, and change to export proceeds. We are also proposing that there should be consideration in introducing tax subsidies for exports as an incentive for local producers to export more of their commodities rather than relying on selling on the local market. Another issue we had was in terms of agriculture. There are inconsistencies in application of withholding tax on farm produce. Currently, if produce is sold at farm gate, there is no withholding tax applicable. But if a farmer decides to sell their produce in town, then this withholding tax becomes applicable. And furthermore, when ADBAG is purchasing the produce from local farmers, they do not deduct the withholding tax. But when private businesses actually do so, then they are charged the withholding tax, which puts the private businesses at a disadvantage and brings inconsistency to the market. So we are proposing that in order to bring sanity and consistency in the market, there should be a level playing field. And we propose that this withholding tax on farm produce should be removed. And now, Honorable Minister, just to zero in terms of the specific budget proposals that we are proposing for 2021-2022 budgets, we have noted that there's been a growth of the informal industry, and this has been facilitated by unfair prices on the market, where smuggled goods are fetching relatively lower prices when you compare to the locally produced products. This also is affecting the manufacturing sector tremendously, as their production is affected, as well as even their profits are also affected. The current country's tax policies actually create an environment where smuggled goods are thriving. Informal traders have continued to use such predatory pricing tactics by selling way below the market prices, since they are not paying duty or any other taxes. And when we look at, when we compare the taxes in Malawi and our neighbors, we seem to have relatively higher taxes, which is exacerbating the smuggling into this country. And so there's been it is also facilitating high tax evasion by the informal sector, and therefore creating an even narrower revenue base for which MRA can rely on. We therefore propose that government should revise its tax policy and lower the taxes to ensure that local industries are competitive when compared to our neighbors or across the region. We are therefore proposing that there should be a downward revision of excise duty from the current 30% to 20% under tariff heading 2206.00.01, which is OPEC-BA, to create more industry growth opportunities in this area. We are also proposing a removal of VAT on wheat flour, especially the locally produced wheat flour, which has made local flour expensive. The current 16.5% VAT on locally produced wheat flour has made local flour more expensive, and it has encouraged smuggling from Mozambique and other countries. So we are proposing that this VAT should be removed. And we are also proposing that there should be removal of the 10% duty on soap noodles, which has made the cost of local soap more expensive relative to foreign produced soap. The other issue we are proposing is on locally printed educational materials, which includes textbooks, that they should move from VAT exempt to zero rated category, so that they are also more competitive. And we are also proposing that there should be a review of the 16.5% VAT on refined cooking oil. This has been an issue that has been raging for a while now, and we hope that you consider it. Another issue is on the VAT on materials for manufacturing textbooks, such as printing paper, which makes the locally produced textbooks more expensive and uncompetitive than the imported ones. as the imported ones are imported at custom duty and VAT free, while the local ones incur VAT. We are also proposing that government should consider removal of taxes on importation of intermediate goods such as paint colorants. These are raw materials meant for manufacturing activities. Government should also consider removing import duty on machinery spare parts imported by manufacturing businesses, as it's creating high machine maintenance costs in regards to spare parts that are not locally available. We are also proposing that the withholding tax for all SMEs should be reduced to 10% from 20%. We are saying this, Honorable Minister, because the delays by MRI to refund withholding tax means that most SMEs are facing liquidity constraints, because the margins of most SMEs are also falling within the range of 15% to 25%, and therefore it's making it difficult for SMEs to make ends meet. So we are hoping that you consider this proposal, Honorable Minister. And also another issue is that Malawi, another proposal is that there is need to remove duty from energies. We are proposing that there should be a reduction in terms of duty and VAT, as well as excise duty that is charged on torch batteries, because Malawi removed all duties from energy-saving products such as energy-saving bulbs, solar panels, and solar batteries. However, most ordinary Malawians, about 52.9%, use ordinary batteries, according to the National Statistical Office population census that was done in 2019. And so, because most of them are using ordinary batteries, but the current taxes are about 25% of duty, 10% excise duty, 16.5% of VAT. These are making the cost of such batteries too expensive for the locals that ordinarily use such batteries for lighting. Another area, Honorable Minister, and which I also highlighted that is one of the main obstacles to doing business, and that is in the telecommunication charges, both cost and supply. We believe that there should be something, there's need to do something in this area, such as removal of some taxes that are in this sector. The high taxes and fees that are charged on ICT sector makes the services general and unaffordable. And for instance, internet providers are asked to pay annual license fees, then their spectrum fees, and then their annual sales turnover levy of 3.5% by MACRA. Additionally, then the internet is also heavily taxed, with excise tax at 10% and VAT at 16.5%. There are also a lot of levies being levied in ICT. For instance, the Malawi Bureau of Standards charge a levy of 0.5% for every ICT equipment that enters Malawi. And another levy that is also charged in the ICT industry is the customer media levy on ICT equipment. And although government stated that this would only be charged for ICT storage equipment sold to end users, the reality on the ground is that it is being applied for all ICT equipment, including cables, whether Ethernet or fiber, and even switches are being charged. So we propose that there should be some reduction of fees and harmonization of fees in this sector, Honorable Minister. Finally, the other proposal is on venture capital companies. As I highlighted earlier, one of the biggest bottlenecks also to doing business in Malawi is the cost and access to finance. And this usually affects the small and medium enterprises who have nowhere to go in terms of accessing finance. And because most of our enterprises also in this economy are SMEs and they are deemed to be the engine of growth, we believe that they should be really considered to ensure that they promote growth of this economy. And therefore, we are proposing that venture capital companies which would close this gap in terms of accessing finance by SMEs should be incentivized so that we have more of these in Malawi. So we propose that government should have deliberate policies to encourage investors to invest in these venture capital companies, such as exemption of dividend tax for the first 5-year period of listing of the company on the Malawi Stock Exchange, and also capital gains tax exemption for the initial 5 years after listing. We believe that this could encourage more of these venture capitalists to enter the market and therefore save the SMEs who are having difficulties in accessing finance in the country. And therefore, with these remarks, I would like to end the presentation. I thank you so much for listening, Honorable Minister and all members present. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation. MCCI. I don't know whether the CEO, whether there's anything else to add before I invite others to comment on the presentation.
Honorable Minister,
Sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said. The CEO? You are muted, CEO.
Can you unmute CEO?
Hello, CEO. Is there anything you wish to add to the presentation?
We may have. Let me check. There may be. He's now on. Yeah, you may proceed, CEO. Chancellor. There may be a connection problem from the chamber. CEO, you are unmuted. You had to make a comment. I want to believe there must be a connectivity challenge, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me invite the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank, whether he's got any comments to make on the presentation.
Good afternoon, Honorable Minister. Thank you so much for giving me this floor. Yes, I wish to thank MCCI for this presentation, and going through what they presented, it does corroborate what we also have discovered from the market in our business interviews exercises, which we jointly mount with the EP&D, Treasury, and the others, going around the business community and the private sector. These are the issues that have also come out time and again for years now. But suffice to mention, Honorable Minister, that the government has made efforts to respond to some of these issues over time. But naturally, I can see from the presentations that the new challenges do crop up over time. And so government has to make sure that it keeps pace with those responses. But so far, from the financial sector side, in terms of access to finance, I want to agree with the presenter that usually it's a problem for the SMEs, but everything is being done to make sure that at least the access to finance should no longer be a constraint to doing business. You recall, Honorable Minister, that after COVID, there is the issue of moratorium that we've issued to the financial sector to make sure that all loans are treated differently during the COVID environment in terms of principal and interest. This is something that will continue reviewing over time as the pandemic rages on. But also to mention that there are initiatives that the Reserve Bank, together with government, has been putting on the ground to ensure that we address the concerns of the SMEs and the private sector at large. I'm sure going forward, the issue of venture capital should be addressed, because those coming in with the capital would also want to make sure that the risks, the attendant risks, are contained, and the instruments and innovations are now being brought onto the table to mitigate such risks to enable them provide the much needed capital to the SMEs. So just to agree with the presenter, Honorable Minister, that maybe these are the areas that need to be looked into. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor. I'll move on to the Commissioner General, MRA. I don't know if the Commissioner General is with us, or maybe his representative.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The Commissioner General was available in the morning, so I'm not sure. Maybe he's not in, but suffice to say that we appreciate the comments from MCCI. Most of the comments, as Arabem has highlighted, these are the issues that indeed the business community has been communicating with both the Ministry of Finance and MRA. So these are well taken, and we are indeed reviewing them. Suffice to say that most of these, the areas that they have highlighted, it seems everything is saying, reduce this, remove this. Maybe MCCI could also help us as we review this. Removing some of the taxes or reducing them could help us by looking at some of the areas that they think government can also be collecting revenues. So on one side, yes, we should be encouraging business growth, but on the other side, we should also be looking at how best can the business community contribute, and maybe which areas is government maybe not taxing, but it should be taxing. I thought I should make that point, so that going forward, maybe MCCI could help us with that as well. Otherwise, we really appreciate these comments, and as Arabima said, they are being looked into. Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, MRA. Maybe moving on, let's go. Budget.
Honorable Minister.
Sorry, you want to come in on that one? Mr. President, you can come.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I was just about to say, I was going to say that Chancellor had a technical problem, but is now able to come in and make the comment. He's surmounted his problem. So if Chancellor, you can unmute and make a contribution, I'll make remarks towards the end. Thank you.
Thank you. With your permission, Honorable Minister, as my colleague said, we tend to say that a lot of challenges are repeated year in, year out. And I think the future of this country, we have to move, and I'm sure every one of us want us to move, is that we needed to take radical changes. Changes for the good of the future, not changes that only consider what is good for now. We are aware that government and indeed everybody else is facing lots of challenges due to COVID-19. We know that the government did not collect enough revenue, or is not collecting enough revenue this year, because even the sources of revenue, the sources of taxes are not doing well generally, and that is a problem. But I think that we will come to a stage where, piecemeal kind of measures are really not helping us move forward. And also, as a country, we have relied so much on a monetary policy to drive the activities of this country. So we are very cautious of what the inflation is going to be. We are very cautious of issues that are actually derivatives. They are derived from the operation of the economy. And we believe that there's really not much wrong if you emphasize so much on fiscal policy, if the government is spending a little more in the right areas, not necessarily spending just for consumption, because you don't get anything afterwards. We believe that government really needs to make decisions that are going to affect the future of this country in a big way, and not necessarily worry too much about the current issues. Unfortunately, experience has shown that we have tended as a country and as a government, we've tended to treat issues in a very small way all the time, and we have not moved with this kind of approach. So the plea from the private sector, Your Excellency, is that there's a need to overhaul the whole scheme of incentives, be it tax, be it anything that is necessary to make sure that this country moves forward. Because we will not move forward if we continue to behave exactly the way that we have behaved, or if indeed when we want to actually institute measures, there are measures that are just lip service. So I think the private sector is looking forward to a budget that is very transformational. I think they do agree, they are working together with the government. The private sector knows that it has got a big role to play in the future of this economy, and that role can be played if indeed we are working together, and we are working together. That's why, Honorable Minister, you spare the time to listen to us, to make a presentation. But we think that that working together should really be in a very transformative manner that is going to benefit both the government and the private sector. We want to make sure we take a leading role in creating the jobs that the government wants to be created for the mass of people that are out there that are not employed. But if the environment is not conducive, private sector is not going to invest, and we will not get the jobs. And yet the private sector creates the well-meaning jobs, the jobs that are sustainable. And also, once that is done, that's where government gets taxes. So I think this year we plead with you that it must be a different year, when we must take steps that are very radical and transformative in order to see a different Malawi, and not the Malawi that we have seen the past years. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, CEO, for those comments and views. There was a response from MRA regarding the recommendations and proposals from MCCCI that it is just, I think most of them basically were, reduce this, reduce that, and so on and so forth. That there hasn't been probably clear proposals in terms of helping out, as to how we can improve, on the revenues, as in fact, CEO, you have alluded to. So what is it that, we have to do in order, for us, at least as maybe the private sector, to also give something in lieu of the reductions that we're asking for. I don't know whether CEO or Chairman, or sorry, President, you have any comment on that?
Yes, Honorable Minister. We received the directive from the President with the open arms. You recall that at the end of last month, the President did issue a directive that ministries, departments, and agencies of government must procure from SMEs as a priority, and also should procure locally manufactured goods as much as possible, so that we are promoting. Government is also helping in promoting local industry. So what we will do as a Chamber of Commerce, and we have been talking with the Secretary to the President and the Cabinet, is to ensure that we play a very active role in making sure that the SMEs register, not only with the Registrar of Companies, but also with the MRA, so that they get into the tax net. We believe that there are a lot of SMEs out there that make a lot of money and which are not paying taxes. The role or the duty to pay taxes is everybody's duty, and the MRA can collect a lot more money, can widen the tax base by actually tapping from these sources that we have not tapped from as a country. So one way in which we want to help government through Malawi Revenue Authority to collect more money is to formalize the informal sector by registering, and we will work with the government, all the necessary, all the ministries, to make sure that they shouldn't give orders to businesses that are not registered, that do not have an MRA PIN, for example. Because we wanted to make sure that that the government actually collects the money that is due to government, because the government must function and there must be a source of money. So the majority of businesses that are out there and are not paying taxes must pay taxes. So that is one way in which we will make sure that we help government widen the tax base. Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Just to add, Honourable Minister, to what Chancellor has just said, is added to registering those SMEs, we also pointed out that if we just turn back the clock, there was that time when we had PVHO, which was institutions that could not afford, didn't have the capital. For example, PVHO had graders. These SMEs, if we begin to bring those about, it will be an incentive for those groups that are informal. They can form into organizations, have institutions to teach them how to conduct business, and then they will be registered for. When these are formalized, we'll have less and less informal operators that disrupt the few taxpayers. So we can work hand in hand, indeed, as Chancellor said, that we broaden the tax base. Not only that, when we have, again, it will be another chart, but I did introduce it to the Secretary to the President and Cabinet, but let's seriously reconsider having graders, for example. If we are going to give Malawians to grade our dead roads, if PVHO, something like PVHO is there, the capital equipment is there, our young people will learn how to maintain plant, and there will be another SMEs that is doing the maintenance, but also they will hire equipment and grade all the roads. The contracts will go to Malawian operators, and they'll be hiring. Now, when quoting to government, it will be just the cost of hiring the equipment for that grade and not costing an entire plant into it. So there are a lot of areas we can work together and also improve revenue and reduce costs to government if we work seriously together. So yes, we are ready to come to the party to work with government so that the bottom line improves for government. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and also, our CEO. I think we can now move on to the Budget Director.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Let me say that we have taken note of the issues that have been raised. As the cooperation, Mike, so that small, medium scale businesses should be able to access financing they cannot get from the mainstream banking. And also currently we have a project with the World Bank, which will also be providing financing to SMEs. So all these initiatives are aimed at addressing the issues that the Chamber has addressed, and we will continue working with the Chamber so that we create a conducive environment that will be that will enable the business to thrive. And our expectation is that when the government implement initiatives, we also expect the companies, businesses to also respond to whatever initiatives government is implementing in trying to improve the business environment. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Budget Director. I don't know if Director for Economic Affairs, Dr. Mare.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Minister, for giving me the chance to contribute. I think I have 2 or 3 areas which I wanted really to comment on. The first one, Honorable Minister and the President for Chamber, is the issue of informalization or formalization of the informal sector. Actually, my whole time of waiting to meet the Chamber in this particular meeting was really to say, what do you think is the role of the Chamber to assist the government in formalizing the informal sector? I think with the little knowledge that I have, I could see a big role that the Chamber and government should work together to formalize the informal sector. And from the presentation I saw clearly that though they are in the informal sector, they are able to compete with the formal because of the obvious issues that were mentioned in the presentation, One, that they are probably out of tax regime, and two, it's also where smuggling is also very rampant. So I think the chamber and government, we really have to have a discussion in terms of how do we help each other to formalize the bigger part of the economy. That's number one. Number two, of course, the issues that MRI mentioned earlier, I want to subscribe to them. I think it's really true that when we see the presentation was just to reduce this. And for you who are in the center here, I don't think then you will see that there is a budget here. I was expecting to have even contributions on the general issues in terms of policy. I think, for example, the one that the CEO mentioned, the issue of formalization, as I said, but also I think we have had these issues in the past, and I think I remember correctly, the general observation that we noted that you can reduce some of these, but the eventual impact is not actually seen. Actually, I think my colleague from the revenue could attribute it to this, that last year we had, I think it was in oil or something like that, and what people were joking on was that it ended up just making them buying new cars. So we need the chamber also to support us and to help government in terms of if we do such kind of proposals, then they have to reflect on the ground. And I think that's the role of the chamber, to support us, to ensure that really we are achieving what we all aim at to have. So these are some of the areas that I thought probably going forward, this is just a budget consultation, but I think there is more that the chamber and government need to do to make sure that we are moving together and having an achievement of what we are looking for. I do subscribe with what the chamber also said, what the CEO said. There is need for us really to look at a holistic picture, because piecemeal kind of, sometimes you end up contradicting, you end up not achieving what you want. So it is important really, but again, normally in such kind of discussions, we really need a detailed and specific analysis from the chamber that we can discuss and be able to have that kind of holistic approach. Otherwise, you are on the ground, you know exactly what is hampering the growth of the private sector. So we need those, and let's discuss them holistically. But if you come and present maybe in a general terms, we would surely not be able to know what you are feeling down there. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Director. I thought maybe you're also going to, touch on the CEO. The CEO also touched on the fact that I think in our planning, we tend to focus on monetary policy. I suppose maybe versus fiscal policy. I don't know. He did touch on that. I wasn't very clear exactly what.
Yeah, I was also not very
to.
clear,
Yes.
but I am not sure whether maybe we can just ask the CEO to come again on that one before we respond. I am here to maybe talk on the fiscal, but maybe my colleague, the Deputy Governor, will also come with the monetary policy. But maybe you can just come again on that one, Honorable Minister.
CEO, I don't know whether you can come back on the issue you alluded to, that the focus is on monetary policy.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. What I meant is, what we noted is sometimes, or most of the times, there is so much emphasis on the monetary policy and not necessarily the fiscal policy. So government would not want to, for example, invest in large-scale projects like roads that the private sector would want to make it competitive, maybe to reach some areas, because it is fearing that there will be inflationary implications. Now, if you are investing, you must obviously expect to face a few challenges in between, but in the end, you will be expecting to get returns. But what we tend to fear so much, and I think a lot of our policies, as I said, are driven by fear of inflation being high. I think, to my recollection, low inflation is used as an indicator of good performance by, I think, all the governments that we have seen come and go. And yet, if you just keep low inflation without necessarily investing because you are fearing for the future, nothing is going to happen. The experience from the literature and also from maybe visiting a few countries is that indeed monetary policy emphasis is very important, but sometimes the government must make a decision in actually investing in large scale projects and then look to the future, because the returns cannot come without investments. I think my colleague did mention that maybe one of the threats to the growth or to the future is the government borrowing, and not necessarily the government borrowing for investment, because, and I think this is coming from the past. We know that we have a new government, but previously, and when we look at the debt stock, maybe we've noted that indeed the government was borrowing, but not necessarily borrowing for investment, but borrowing for consumption. So I think the point I wanted to bring forward is that I think low inflation is important, but low inflation for the sake of low inflation is not going to sustain the economy. We will remain where we are because we want to make sure that inflation is low. So sometimes as a government, let us invest big time in big projects that have returns after a long time, and not necessarily just being afraid to say, no, we can't go into such large projects because they're inflationary in nature. I think that's the point I was trying to bring across. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Honorable Minister, maybe just to add to that, I was looking with interest the irrigation canal being established in the Shire Valley, and what the chamber can do when there's water flowing there. It is a lot of SMEs can be established. We very well know that we cannot go into the banana exporting business in Malawi because we haven't got the quantities. But if 50,000 or even 20,000 people in the valley have formed SMEs and are growing bananas, we can even be exporting, invest that government has done to let water run from the Shire and feed those areas. Then the chamber can say, let's mobilize SMEs. And when they are all producing, now all the EPA will have the extension workers. Small levies, which these SMEs will be paying for getting that consumption, borrowing for consumption, but for investment. So, yeah.
Sorry, Mr. President, you are breaking up. It's a bit difficult to hear most of what you are saying. We are picking up here and there.
Information because of what comes out of it. Working together, all these become the formal sector, and they are into production. Government will have a lot of revenues out of that, but first we have to suffer the sacrifice of focusing on those capital investments. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I think now I do get the approach where the CEO is coming from. My response will be in the form. I think first to just mention that I think in the current situation, it would not be correct to say that government should be blamed, that its policies are really being fearful of action. This is so because our budget, you can agree with me, been redone.
Boma kudzera ku nduna za umoyo ndi chilengedwe cha anthu likudziwitsa anthu onse kuti kwagwa mliri wa matenda a corona omwe mwachidule akutchulidwa kuti COVID-19 m'mayiko ena.